it going? Welcome back to another video by myself, Beach ASMR. Today we're going to continue looking at this Lonely Planet book about Sweden, and we're going to have a check out of the history section, and we're going to look at the history of Sweden through 15 different places. I really hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you are doing well, whether you're studying, relaxing, de-stressing. I really hope everything's all alright. Before we jump into it, I've just started doing custom videos, or just started offering custom videos. There'll be a link in the description to check that out, or if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email through the email in the description as well. So, without further ado, let's jump into the video. Here we go. Oh, look at that. So, a history of Sweden in 15 places. I'm just going to make sure where the book is all within the frame. Perfect. So we'll start off with the introduction. Sweden's history and culture is proudly displayed in palaces, churches, museums, and other heritage sites across the country. There are many epic tales, political intrigues, and memorable characters in the chapters of the nation's journey from Viking stronghold via major 17th century European power to modern day democratic welfare state. I haven't read any of this yet because I wanted my reaction to be live to any of the things we read. So, human settlement in what is now Sweden began around 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. These people included the Sami in the north, but the name Sweden comes from another of these tribes, the Sphere of the Mälaren Valley west of Stockholm. By 600 CE, the Sphere had gained supremacy, and their kingdom, Sverige, gave Sweden its name. I'm gonna bottle this, but I think it's Sveriga. I read that as Sverige, but it's probably not. I really apologize for butchering it. The Sphere built ships from which they sailed to plunder neighbouring countries. Known as Vikings, these fearsome pagan warriors sailed as far as the coast of North America. Christianity began to take hold when King Olaf Skotkonung was baptized. By 1160, King Erik Jedvason, Sweden's patron saint, St. Eric, had virtually destroyed the last remains of paganism. In 1397, Danish Queen Margaret I united Sweden, Denmark, and Norway under the Union of Kalmar. The union ended in 1521, and for the following 300 years, Sweden waged a series of wars with Denmark and Russia for control over the Baltic. In the early 19th century, Sweden lost Finland to Russia, but gained Norway from Denmark, a union that was dissolved in 1905. its days of empire over, Sweden remained neutral throughout both world wars and is today known as one of the world's most advanced welfare states. Well, that's quite a nice brief history. I didn't know that they remained neutral in both world wars, but it makes sense. So, let's look through. We've got 15 different places that tell us about the history of Sweden in a little more depth. Here we go. So, if I do that, will that zoom? No, okay. Number 1, the Tanum rock carvings in Bohuslen coast. Which I think are these things here, the rock carvings. So, between 1800 BCE and 500 BCE, Bronze Age cultures blossomed across Scandinavia. From this period, burial mounds such as Kviksgraven in Österland suggest that powerful chieftains controlled spiritual and temporal matters, providing some insight into the lives of ordinary Bronze Age folk. Providing some insight into the lives of ordinary Bronze Age folk are the World Heritage listed Tanum rock carvings, which are pictured right here. Located around the modern town of Tanumshid on the Bohuslen coast, at least 350 distinct groups of rock art comprising hundreds of individual carvings depict scenes of ships, hunting, and domestic life. At the time of carving, the sites would have been close to the water because the sea was 15 meters higher. Number 2, Gamla Uppsala, which are some ancient royal burial mounds. Among Sweden's oldest national symbols are the royal mounds of Gamla Uppsala. In the past, these 6th century CE burial chambers were believed to be either those of Norse gods Thor, Odin, and Freyr, or the equally mythical kings of the Yngling dynasty. Excavations in the 19th century proved they contain the bodies of ancient royals, including at least one woman. For many centuries until the Middle Ages, Gamla Uppsala was the location of the Thing of all Swedes. The governing assembly coincided with the great fair and religious celebration known as Decemblot, a tradition that endures to this day in Uppsala's annual distinct market fair. I do apologise when it's up in this top corner, that's quite far away from me and I have to be right by the mic, so I'm like squinting to read it. Nevertheless, let's move on to Sigtuna, the first Swedish town. During the Viking Age, 793 to 1066 CE, pagan Norsemen raided, colonized, traded throughout Europe and as far as North America and Asia. Swedish Vikings were more inclined towards trade than their Norwegian or Danish counterparts, and remains of major Viking settlements are dotted around Lake Mälaren, including Birka, Sigtuna, which lays claim to Sweden's oldest high street, is said to have been founded by King Eric the Victorious around 950 CE. By the end of the Viking Age, as many as 7 churches had been erected. The first Swedish coins were struck in Sigtuna, which flourished as a commercial and political centre in the 13th century. I wonder how far that is from Stockholm now. Anyways, Visby, Hanseatic League stronghold. Once a Viking stronghold, UNESCO listed Visby, the capital of Gotland, is the largest island in the Baltic. It was the Hanseatic League's dominant port from the 12th to the 14th century. Its stone ramparts and over 200 its stone ramparts and over 200 13th century warehouses and merchants' dwellings make it the best preserved medieval city in northern Europe. In 1361, around 1800 islanders died outside Visby's walls in a battle with the army of Danish king Valdemar IV. Visby's prominence as a trading and political centre ended in 1525 when it was stormed by an army from Lübeck and the northern parts were burnt. Next up, we have Kalmar Slot, key to the kingdom. This medieval castle, which dates to the 12th century when it was built as a lone fortified tower, was known as the key to the kingdom due to its strategic location near the border of Sweden and Denmark. It was in 1397 that the Kalmar Union between Sweden, Norway and Denmark was agreed. Queen Margaret I of Denmark was the mastermind of this pact, which unified the countries through a common monarch and common foreign policy, mainly to act as counterweight to the German Hanseatic League. When Gustav Vasa became King of Sweden in 1523, the union was formally dissolved. Next up, let's have a look at Stortorget, Stockholm, the Stockholm bloodbath. Early in the 16th century, the Kalmar Union was faltering. Its death knell was sounded by the Stockholm bloodbath of 1520. This public execution of over 80 people, included nobles and bishops, took place in Stortorget, the main square of Gamla Stan. At the time was pretty much the extent of the city. The massacre swiftly followed the coronation of Christian II, a Dane, as Sweden's king. Christian was attempting to secure his power against anti-Union forces, but instead succeeded in making himself even more unpopular in Sweden, where he's known as Christian the Tyrant, and speeding the rise of Gustav Vasa, whose father was killed in the bloodbath. Okay, let's have a look now at Domkyrka, Uppsala, home to Gustav Vasa's grave. We're hearing a lot about Gustav Vasa, Sweden's king from 1523. Gustav Vasa was the first in a dynastic line that would rule the country until Queen Christina in 1654. Like his counterpart, Henry VIII, Vasa broke with the Catholic Church, introducing the Protestant Reformation to Sweden. Through a 1544 Parliament Act, he made the monarchy hereditary, and by the time of his death in 1560 had created a powerful, centralized nation-state. Vasa is buried in this Uppsala cathedral alongside his 3 wives. The Domkirke is also where King Eric IX, Sweden's patron saint, is buried and where royal coronations were held until the 17th century. Okay, and let's move on to number 8, Drottningholm Slot, built by Queen Hedvig Eleonora. The zenith and collapse of the Swedish Empire happened quickly during the 17th century. In this era, when the kings were either too young to rule fully or away fighting wars, it was Queen Hedvig Eleonora who held the most power. Both son Karl XI and grandson Karl X Gustaf were devoted to Hedvig Eleonora and took her counsel seriously. Hers was an age of intrigue, gossip, and various sordid alliances, both personal and political. She loved the theatre, had a gambling habit, and liked to party. She is perhaps best known for building Drottningholm Slot, employing the leading architects and artists of her time. Number 9, we have Kungliga Slottet, a new palace for Stockholm. Even before the 1967 fire had destroyed the medieval The Kronor, 3 Crowns Castle, plans for a new royal palace in Stockholm were underway. In 1960, Nicodemus Tessin the Younger was commissioned to modernize the northern portion of the palace. The fire required this plan to be extended to the entire complex. Tessin reckoned the new palace pictured, I think it's this one here, would take 6 years to be built, but it took almost 60 due to a lack of money. In December 1754, King Adolf Frederick and Queen Lovisa Ulrika moved in. The massive palace was also home to Sweden's government, various ministries, and the Royal Library. Gripsholm Scott, we're at number 10 already. Theatre for the Theatre King. Adolf Friedrich's heir, Gustav III, came to the throne in 1771. Because of his love of the arts and performance, he is known as the Theatre King. In 1781, Gustav III commissioned a theatre at his summer palace Gripsholm Slot. It is considered a masterpiece of neoclassical interior design. However, Gustav's theatre habit proved his downfall. In March 1792, the king was shot while at a masked ball in Stockholm's Royal Opera House, dying 13 days later. The assassination, an inspiration for Verdi's opera Un Baio in Maschera, was the result of a conspiracy hatched by nobles alarmed at the king's autocratic ways. Next up, Utvandramas hus Factio? I'm lost on that one, sorry. Museum of Immigration. For much of the 19th century, Sweden was a poor and conservative country. This, coupled with a great famine in 1867-69, led to mass immigration of Swedes to the US and Canada. By the 1930s, some 1.3 million had crossed the Atlantic. The story of those immigrants is told at this small museum, where you can learn about Wilhelm Moberg, author of The Immigrants, Quartet of Novels. Moberg was born in Småland, known as Poor Sweden, and so had great insight into the economic and cultural poverty that drove many he knew to their new world. Last page. Number 12. Stadshuset, Stockholm, symbol of Swedish nation. By the early 20th century, industrialization was in full swing and Sweden was becoming increasingly urban. In 1905, Sweden finally stood on its own as the union with Norway, established in 1814, was dissolved. This was a time of nation building and for creation of modern Swedish symbols such as Stockholm's City Hall, the building's Grand Blue Hall and Golden Hall are locations of the annual Nobel Prize banquet and ball, a televised occasion which is Sweden's equivalent of the Oscars. The Nobel Prizes are named after the Swede Alfred Nobel, a 19th century inventor and industrialist best known for creating dynamite. Right, this will be fun. IKEA Museum Almhult. I think we've all been to IKEA. I love going to IKEA. Post-World War II design hit. Sweden's soft power ascendancy in the post-World War II world included the international success of local brands such as Electrolux and Volvo. However, nothing has had quite the same impact as Ingvar Kamprad's decision to sell furniture in 1948. He opened his first showroom in the little town of Almhult in 1953. Look around now and you'll probably see something in your room that you got there because Ingvar, the entrepreneur, had that vision. I can tell you this desk is from IKEA. The bookshelf that is just there is from IKEA. There's another desk in this room from IKEA behind me that you might see in some of my normal trigger videos. And the set of drawers that you see behind me in my trigger videos are also from IKEA. And there's the bin in this room is from IKEA. And I think my lamp's from IKEA. And there's a file organizer I've got a lot of stuff from IKEA. Anyways, so Ingvar the entrepreneur had that vision. From that Almhult store, now a museum, which I think is this picture here. This is the IKEA museum. IKEA grew into the world's largest furniture retailer, a standard bearer for affordable Swedish design. I love it. This makes me want to go to Almhult. Next up, ABBA, the museum, Stockholm. While IKEA was busy conquering the world with Billy bookcases. ABBA was doing the same with catchy Swedish pop. Formed in 1972 by Björn Ulvaeus, Benny Andersson, Agnetha Fältskog and Annie Fridlingstad, the group burst onto the international scene by winning 1974's Eurovision contest with Waterloo. After hit followed in the 1970s before their breakup in 1982. But ABBA never really went away, and by the time this museum opened in Stockholm in 2013, they were icons and an inspiration to subsequent generations of Sweden music makers, including Robin and EDM masters Swedish House Mafia and Avicii. Rest in peace. Okay. The very, very, very last thing we're going to look at is Riksdagshuset in Stockholm. Greta's protest started here. So, in 2018, a 15-year-old girl started skipping school on Fridays to stand outside Sweden's parliament with her Skolstrejk för klimatet placard. Greta Thunberg's actions proved not only an inspiration to her contemporaries who soon joined her in an ever-increasing numbers for her Fridays for Future protests, but to millions around the world, similarly concerned about global warming. In November 2022, Thunberg was among the 600 plus activists marching through the Swedish capital on the 223rd school strike to submit a class action in court against the state for insufficient climate action. And that was outside Riksdagshuset in Stockholm. So, there we have it. From Tannum Rocks all the way in the Bronze Age to the school strike for climate in 2018, ABBA, IKEA, the Museum of Immigration, Gruppsholm Slot, the theatre, the palaces from the 17th century, the unifications. We've learned so much. Thank you very, very much. I've already had a couple requests to cover some other Scandinavian countries. So when I next go to the library, I'm going to drop this book back. I might make one more video from it before I do so, but I'm going to drop this back and I'm going to see if I can find some more Lonely Planet books for us to read, because I have quite enjoyed this one about Sweden. Some really interesting stuff in here. Okay. If you have any suggestions, please leave them down in the comments. Remember, custom videos, everything's in the description, but really most importantly, I hope you're nice and relaxed. I hope you've learned something, and I really hope you're doing okay. So, I'll see